Welcome to Rewired Sober, the podcast that breaks down the real reasons women turn to alcohol. Spoiler alert, it wasn't a character flaw. It was your neurobiology, your conditioning, and the systems that taught women to silence themselves instead of support themselves. I'm your host, Kate Vitela. I've been a registered nurse for well over 2 decades, trained in addiction and mental health, a bit neuroscience obsessed, but spiritually grounded. This is the science and soul work of a woman's recovery, where I help you understand what's happening in your sober brain and reconnect to that deeper inner truth you've always had, that soul level knowing, the intuition the patriarchy has tried to train out of you. When women combine the science of the brain rewiring with that inner knowing, you stop feeling broken and you start feeling powerful. So let's get into it. Okay, welcome back to Rewired Sober. So today we are talking about She Recovers, the nonprofit global grassroots movement, including over 325,000 women. And I am lucky today to be joined by one of its founders. Now, what I love most about She Recovers as a community is it's not asking women to split themselves off into neat little boxes. You can be in recovery from grieving, anger, spiritual issues, burnout, substance use. You can be a mother. You can not be a mother. You bring your full self to the table. And there's this core truth at the heart of She Recovers that I deeply resonate with, which is that we're all recovering from something. Because healing doesn't happen in pieces. It happens when the whole woman is brought to the room. So today I am joined by Dawn Nickel. She is going to come on and talk about a lot of different things, but namely we're going to talk about why a woman's recovery has to be contextually and inclusive and rooted in lived experience. So I'm bringing on Dawn Nickel, Dr. Dawn Nickel. She is a healthcare policy expert, consultant, and thought leader in the North American recovery movement with over 30 years of experience in research, policy development, and systems change focused on mental health, addiction, intimate partner violence, and trauma-informed care. She brings a deep understanding of how to build meaningful, sustainable support systems for people in recovery. Dawn holds a PhD in health policy and has advised governments, corporations, and nonprofit organizations across North America. She's also a certified professional recovery coach and the founder of She Recovers. So in case you're living under a rock, this is the nonprofit dedicated to supporting women in seeking recovery for substance use, mental health challenges, and trauma. Dawn is frequently called upon to guest on podcasts and to share her expertise and her experience in recovery with diverse audiences. And she offers insight, humor, compassion, and practical tools for healing and growth. She is also the author of She Recovers Every Day, which is Meditations for Women, published by Hazelden. So after that extensive introduction for a woman I just could not have any more respect for, Dr. Dawn. I'm going to just call you that because I love that.
I'm okay with that.
Welcome to the podcast.
Aw, thanks, Kate. It's really nice to be here and to spend some time with you. I've also been a fan from afar. Well, not that far. I mean, we're both West Coast, Best Coast gals, so I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, so we crossed paths, I don't know, I think via email from various mutual friends, right? We're all swimming in the same waters. And I was thinking before we hit record, have I ever met you in person? And I met you very briefly at the She Recovers trip to Miami. When I very first got off the plane, got to my hotel, got in my elevator, and you were in the elevator with your daughter, and I briefly said hi to you. And then afterwards I thought, wow, most people go this entire trip and don't actually meet Dawn. And here I am, already killing it. So, I should
remember that. Oh, good heavens. I remember that. That was, well, we've done 4 of those large conferences, right? Starting in New York, and then at the Beverly Hilton in LA, and then the Biltmore in Miami,
yeah.
and then the Palmer House in Chicago. And Miami was one of our favorites for sure. So it's quite memorable. We were also just coming out of the pandemic.
So just to start off with a very basic, broad question, what are you noticing that She Recovers is offering that mainstream recovery is missing?
Yeah, so I mean, you covered some of that in the introduction and the description of kind of what we do, right? It's that we invite, everybody is welcome, and we say women and non-binary individuals who identify with women's communities are welcome, and that's who makes up our community. But I guess we honor lived experience, but we recognize that overlapping identities shape access, safety, and opportunity. And so we try to be cognizant of that in everything we do. The idea that there's kind of 3 things, I guess, primarily. You can come regardless of what you're recovering from. That said, probably 85% of the women who do land in our community identify as being in substance use recovery. Some of them are long-term recovery, like myself, and you've been doing this for a while now as well. And others are brand new, and others are kind of somewhere in the middle. So there are a lot of people there for substance use, but there are also people who are like long-term recovery that are there because now we're dealing with menopause or grief or changes, divorce, retirement. We believe that addiction or substance use issues, not all substance use issues are addiction, also are, related to such a correlation with mental health. So we have a lot of people coming in who have depression issues or a lot of anxiety. I'm also a person with high functioning anxiety. So it's just, everybody's welcome regardless. So I think that when people come in, again, a lot of people find us because they're looking for substance use recovery. But then they talk to people that they know and invite other people to come in who maybe they have a child in addiction or they've lost somebody. Or they have, we have a group called Mamas of High Needs Children for mothers in recovery who have children on the autism scale. So it's kind of like, what's different about us is there are no outside issues for anybody familiar with 12-step recovery language. If you're in an AA meeting, then you're there because you're going to talk about alcohol and only alcohol, and you're not even going to talk about marijuana or other addiction. And there's no outside issues. You bring whatever it is. And the other thing is that, from that, what makes us different is we just really, really do believe and advocate for multiple pathways and a patchwork approach to recovery. So we want people to understand that there is not just one way, and that really that they should, one way probably, and I will say one way, the traditional 12-step recovery way will work for millions of people, and it does. And I'm so grateful for that. It's still the most accessible, easiest, freest program out there, but it's not going to work for everybody. And we've just really stepped into that knowing and being known for, you can be in 12-step recovery and come to She Recovers. You can have had a bad experience and come and try to heal from that experience. You can do both, all of those things. And I guess kind of third, that. So that's it, kind of, anything you bring, it's not just one way of recovering. And then thirdly, I think it's just a really non-judgmental, accepting, inviting space, right? We're not, even if it's substance use, we're not abstinence-based. Again, I would say the majority of people who are seeking support for substance users are looking to, not necessarily be successful substance users. But because we don't have a focus on abstinence, then women are really welcome to come in and, say, I'm just thinking this through. I'm just testing this out. I've been doing sober October for 14 years and I'm not there yet, and I don't know where I'm trying to go, but I'm trying to develop a healthier relationship with alcohol, and I want support to do that. And I think what we hear from people mostly because we do, of course, as a researcher, we obviously do our own studies of our own community, is it's kind of those 3 things that draw people to us and keep them hanging out, because it's kind of like they show up at a meeting and that day it's their substance use, but the next day it's divorce, and the next day their mom's dying. And so, they can just bring their whole person. They don't have to silo and carve off, bring all the pieces, as you say. And then again, just in our community, everybody shares so much about what's happening for them. Our gatherings are always very like tools focused. Like, what are you doing for this, and how do you deal with that? So people kind of get that piece. And then, there's just no shame in our game, right? And I'm well known for a saying that goes something like, it goes exactly like, the shit you did is just the shit you did. It's not who you are. And I think that, so in opposition to, and again, proud 12-step recovery member, I consider myself a member of a program, a 12-step program for people in recovery from addiction. I haven't been to a meeting for a long time. I don't do service in that program anymore, but because the only requirement for membership is the desire to stop using drugs, and I have that, I can claim my seat there whenever I want, and I will, and I'll always say that because I owe so much of my recovery to that program. That said, I've written about, and I talk about, and I present about, there's some harm done in 12-step recovery programs to women, and it's not the program or even the philosophy. It's the people in the program, right? It's the personalities in the program that have really staunch and strong ideas about how things should be done. And there's some control and shaming that goes on around that. And again, not everybody, obviously. The majority of people don't, or we wouldn't have such huge success rates. And I like to point out that, AA in particular is studied by John Kelly at Harvard. It is a successful modality, and it's, the research shows that. People used to say, there's no research saying it works. Now there is.
Yeah.
But it's just so important, I think. So in all of this stuff, we're really also, we believe in diversity, and we believe in creating spaces for people with different kind of backgrounds and different issues, doing recovery, different ways to come in. And one of the things we found when we started kind of working online was that we have women in our community who want to be part of the whole, and they want to be part of the kind of the grassroots movement, but they also want space for themselves and their unique circumstances. So for instance, we have a Black, Latina, Asian, Indigenous women of color group because our members requested. So, many, I don't go to that group for obvious reasons, but I know that a lot of those group members still come to our regular groups as well. But they also have this space, and that was particularly important in 2020 when we started our online gatherings and in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder, when, people of color were not feeling safe in anywhere, basically. Yeah. And so that's just something, we have an LGBTQ plus group that meets up every single week. And again, they go in and out of the regular meetings in their own spaces. Even healthcare and allied professionals, which includes coaches and therapists and all of that. Again, 2020, nurses and therapists were like burning the fuck out, excuse my language, and they needed a space where they could go and just say like, I'm supporting people all day in my career. I just need to say, this is hard. So just kind of those types of things, I think, make us exceptional in the space. I love all the sober spaces, all the sober moms group. I think I met your work originally. I think I started paying attention or knew you when you were part of the Sober Mom Squad, and now we have the Sober Mom Collective as one of our trusted resources, and we're entering into a partnership with Soberistas from the UK, and there's all that, but so many of the online platforms are focused specifically on sobriety, and with people like yourself and other people who have more nuanced understandings of like, it's not necessarily just about the booze, approach it from that, but we really do try and kind of pull all the threads and support people.
Yeah. When you bring up outside issues as being something that we don't talk about in 12-step rooms, well, first of all, I come from 12-step background as well. I got sober in the rooms of AA, and I went religiously for 2 years until the pandemic. I got sober in 2018. And for a lot of reasons, I stepped out of those rooms. And yet, two things can be true. It also saved my ass. So if the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking, then I too am a member. Also, my recovery is so many outside issues. My drinking was so many outside issues. So I could not, as a woman, as a nurse, as a coach, say, we're going to exclude all of those things, right? And that's what I loved about She Recovers is I came to She Recovers having struggled with disordered eating, mental health issues, so many things. It was like a cesspool of just different things. And drinking was just the solution. It was never the problem. And so, yeah, I mean, I think we're totally on the same page there. And I'm curious, what really brought you to this place where you were like, we have to have intersectional recovery. We cannot, fragment people off and say no outside issues. And we have to make it inclusive for Black and brown individuals and LGBTQ who come to recovery at the intersection of different struggles and challenges. I'm very passionate about that.
Yeah. I started off actually not thinking about how we're all in recovery from something. And what happened was in NA, in the program that I was so passionate about and was so involved in for so many years, I started going to meetings in 1987 to AA, but I was smoking pot for 2 years. So what I loved about AA at that time was they didn't want me to talk about smoking pot, and I wanted to smoke pot, so that worked.
There you go.
Then in 1989, I went back to treatment, second time, and stopped smoking marijuana, and I started going to NA where they did care if I was going to smoke pot. And so really got immersed in that. And in the first, I have to I just became that person, that woman who I had the sponsor, I had the sponsees, I worked the steps just crazy. I was doing all the service. And I was spouting all the rhetoric. I was, just saying all the things, and it saved my ass. I love that you said that. It saved my ass. It saved my family's lives, right? It saved my family. But after a few years in, I went back to school, so I wasn't quite as involved. I wasn't going to as many meetings or doing as much service. And I started feeling this pressure from other women who I loved dearly. Some who I still love today. I'm sure I'd love them all if they were still in my life, but some are still in my life. A little bit of pressure for what are you doing? You're coloring outside of the lines with all this therapy and these other things that you're doing. And don't forget, the steps are what saved your life, and you have to do this and that.
Yeah. Repeat
and
those
so I
steps
felt
over and over.
I felt a bit uneasy about it, but also I said, okay, you're right. So I would try to do it their way. And then I would I'm getting burnt out here. And, and then I had this one wonderful sponsor who was really, really more aligned with where I was, where I got to be, and certainly where I am now. And she said to me one day, because my kids were young, they weren't, they were in middle school, maybe elementary and middle school. And I was just saying I got to go to this many meetings and do this much service and all this stuff. And I was struggling with it. And she said, Dawn, just go home and be with your kids in the evening. Go to one meeting a week. And I was like, oh my God, one meeting a week. I'm sure, I'm going to use drugs and die if I go to one meeting a week. And she's like, I don't think so. You've been doing this for a number of years. You're pretty committed. I see you, you can carry the program around with you during the day and in the evening. And if you get in trouble, you can reach out. She said, the thing of them, it's time to make sure that you're focused on your family's healing. And your children, she said, the children of people in recovery programs do not know or care if their parents are out getting loaded or doing deals in the back alley, or if they're at a meeting. They're not there. They're not home with them. And that impacts them. Wow. They're not present for them. And that really impacted me. So then that gave me permission to stop going to as many meetings, handed in my service, stop saying yes to everybody who asked me to sponsor them. And I just started feeling really confident. So the pressure to I just remember going to a meeting, and this one fellow, God bless him, he's since passed away from natural causes. But he said, oh, so you got a life here and now you forgot where you got it, or something. You got a life in recovery and then you forgot where you got it.
All the things.
And I remember, if he'd said that 6 months previous, I would have been devastated. And instead, I just said, wow, and walked away. And it didn't even, it was because I still go, wow, that happened.
Yep.
So I guess for me, what I started to do then was see that I wasn't the only person making decisions about stepping outside of the norm and out of the program. And it was true, what people said. I did see women who stopped going to meetings and started using drugs and died. I did see that. It happened. Mm-hmm. But I also was observing that there were women who were stopping going to meetings and going back to school, or getting into a yoga practice or a meditation practice or art or writing or something, and they were thriving. And I was like, wait a minute, so it's not always true that if you stop going to meetings, you're going to use and die. And that was just in the first 5 years, right, that I started seeing that. So by now, here we are. It's been, oh gosh, I can't do math very well. 38 years or something that I've been in recovery. Wow. There's as much evidence for people surviving and thriving outside of 12-step recovery as there is in And we're only really just starting to take notice of people doing so. Like, the research on how many people are doing it without 12-step recovery is just kind of coming into the conversation. So that was interesting to me. And so I always kind of had this sense of, okay, so you can recover different ways. That's okay. I'm good. Like, therapy was kind of my thing when I stepped away from 12-step recovery. I really got into therapy. And then also, kind of my observation was that people can, like, they'll continue to do it their way and they will thrive. And it's so empowering. Like, okay, so here's the idea. We don't have to do it this way. We need to be supported to find and follow individualized pathways and patchworks of recovery, which is word for word one of our 10 intentions and guiding principles. It wasn't until 2011 when I hit the wall with workaholism, with overworking, that I started to expand my thinking even more, that it wasn't just about substances, and then, and even now, I mean, there is this, like, recovery means it has to be about substances. Although mental health recovery has been certainly something, like, has kind of come into the, like, there was this ethos of, you also do recover from mental health issues. But when I hit the wall with workaholism, it just became very clear to me what you said, right? Which I say quite often as well. It's the substances weren't necessarily the problem. They were the solution. They were my coping mechanism. And that I could start, again, more therapy, and I could see how, by then I had a really good understanding of why I use substances, and it goes back to my childhood and, low self-esteem and all those other things. But here I am now, and I'm, at this point, 50 years old, hit the wall. I'm so sick. Like, my marriage is in tatters. My daughters aren't speaking to me. My health is suffering. I'm having anxiety attacks. All these horrible things are kind of happening around me. And it's because of addiction to work. And I was just like, what the hell is this?
Wow.
And I just got, I really got to the bottom of it because, like, I'd had so many years of therapy and I, I was proud of myself and I did all the, and it just came down to that there was still that not enough hole in me. But now I was trying to fill the not enough hole with working and being recognized, working 3 careers at the same time, producing, making money, like those all of a sudden, they became my worth, right? My work had become my worth.
Yeah.
And that was a shock to me because when I hit the wall or hit my bottom, because I hit a bottom, I'm not a soft bottom person. I was a hard bottom person. I had known for years and years that I had substance issues, that I was not a successful drug user, although I kept trying. When I hit the wall with workaholism, I got to experience what denial feels like. Because I was like, what are you talking about? There is nothing wrong with this. This is just what I have to do. Just what I have to do. I've got to teach and I've got to be a consultant and I've got to lead this high functioning team in government. Like, this is just my job. It's not a problem. So it was interesting for me to finally experience what deep, deep denial felt like. And it took me 4 months of being off, giving up all my work, like completely unplugging from work, to understand and really get to a place where I could heal and even go back into a little bit of work. And I did just a little bit of work for a few years. And it's still the thing that I struggle with the most. And I have to, because I can slip back into unhealthy work behaviors. Not in complete denial about it. Like, I'll recognize it, but it doesn't necessarily mean I stop it.
Quick pause here, folks, because some of you might be listening to this and thinking, okay, I'm on a sober journey, but I still feel stuck. Yeah, that's normal. Removing the alcohol is one thing. Rewiring the brain, rebuilding your actual life is the real work. And that's why I created the Rewired Sober coaching program. It's 3 months where we combine neuroscience, soul work with weekly live support calls so you can actually understand what's happening in your head and your body. You can start anytime, you get immediate access, and you don't have to figure this all out alone. If you're ready for transformation, the link to join is in the show notes, and I hope to see you there. Now back to the show. Do you feel like it's sort of an adaptation to keep you safe, or have you gotten to the root of, like, what drives this, or what drives this in other women?
So the thing that differentiates a person who works a lot or too much from a workaholic is the internal impetus, right? People, and this is something I learned fairly recently because I was diving back into the academic literature for a presentation that I gave to the Global Exchange Conference a couple of weeks ago on workaholism. And it kind of opened my eyes to something that I hadn't really integrated into my own story or into my presentation or into kind of my thinking about this, is that yeah, I would say for the last 14 years since I've become an expert on workaholism, I've almost every time I've witnessed somebody who like works and works and works and works and works a lot, or for extended periods of time, I label them a workaholic. Now, we're not supposed to do that with alcoholics. Like, we're not supposed to say, yeah, that's an alcoholic. But somehow I thought, like, well, I'm an expert. That person's a workaholic. And I realize now that I don't know that, because I don't know what the internal versus external pressures are. And if people are just working really hard because, like, that's what it takes to get a business up and going, but at the end of the day, like, it's not their, like, they're not having the same, it's not having the same impact on them as it has on somebody who's like me. So I can't speak for what it is for all people, because every single person's internal kind of impetus for why they overwork is different. But for me, what I've recognized is it's something I do to regulate. Like, it's not healthy. But like, if I sit down and I'm on my computer, there's something about like that somatically is actually regulating me. So if I'm nervous, like, I'll reach for work. Like, if I'm anxious about something to do with my grown children or my grandchildren, like, somehow just getting in and clearing out an inbox. And so I had this like really, really brief interlude into like a gambling problem after my mom passed away. Short, because I realized like I don't like giving away money. Like, they were like doing something to my brain in the same way that sitting at my desk and going through and the set of completion. I realized earlier, like before this 14 years of work on this, that I was still looking for, I wanted my mom and my dad to be proud of me. And so I did a PhD just because I wanted my mom to be proud of me, but she died before I finished my PhD. And my dad was proud of me, but he really, he'd never gone to university. He didn't really have an understanding. He would, when we'd be around people, he'd say, Dawn, tell Frank here, tell him, what's your certificate in again? And I'd say, oh, my certificate is in health policy. Like, that's what I got a certificate. But until my dad died 3 years ago, even, for about 10 years after my mom died, it was my career and showing up as, like, now I have my PhD, I'm teaching at the university, I'm a bigwig director in government, I'm making tons of money as a consultant. And, like, just to hear my dad say, even though it was like, what's your certificate in? He goes, oh, do you know how much money she made this year? Or anyway, so there was that. Like, I wanted my dad's attention because I never had it when I was a kid, or my mom's. And that's, so like, so much of it goes back to our childhood. I don't know. I'm 65. There's still stuff there, but now I do think the work is less driven from an internal sense of not enough. And it's more like it's regulating for me. It's habitual. It's just what I know. It's what I go to. The work I do is very much in the area of mental health, addiction in women, and She Recovers, and the nonprofit is like, the impetus for me is, the internal impetus is, I want to make a difference so badly. I want us to make, like, not me as an individual. Like, I just want women in recovery to make a difference, because I'm so tired of seeing people die and people suffer and families blow apart. And so, there is kind of that. It's interesting because going into like my final act, I'm 65. I've had cancer. Like, I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to be here till I'm 100. It is really about thinking about what does stepping back look like from my life, like from my work life, because a lot of my life is work. Even my volunteering for She Recovers, my being CEO, kind of a pretend CEO, because I take a small stipend, but it's not like a big career moving thing. Like, what does it look like to step back? And it's fun for me to think about it, and it doesn't scare me. It doesn't scare me to think about not working. And then finally, I'll just stop talking because I'm talking an awful lot. But what I've learned about myself is that now when I am overworking, it is because of the external pressure and not internal. Like, the working is regulating. I don't overwork generally, but if I do overwork, it's because we have to launch our year-end campaign, which we did 2 weeks ago, and there was like this brief period of time where I was overworking it. And when I'm in it, I'm not comfortable in it. And that's the difference. I used to thrive, and now I'm like, I hate this. I can't wait till Saturday when this is done, and I'm not going to turn off this computer, and I'm not going to look at it for 4 days. But it's very much the balance is I'm going to work like this. If I have to work like this, then I'm going to not work for this period of time. And that's how I found balance.
Yeah, we find balance as we get to know ourselves and, peel back those layers and figure out ways that we work. And I love that you framed workaholism up with so much nuance, because you're right, two things can be true. And there's many reasons we work super hard. I think about that as an entrepreneur. And I'm sure just the countless hours that you put in to doing this thing because you so desperately want to get this work out into the world and provide this service and this knowing. As soon as I learn new things about addiction, I'm like, I got to hit record and do a whole nother podcast. And, it just is this drive. Sometimes it wakes me up in the middle of the night and I got to hit record and start doing something or typing something or creating a lesson or something, And I recently came across, it looks like Leah from the Sober Mom Collective was doing a talk on, recovery not being a privilege. And I really identified with that as an entrepreneur. And I was curious to get your take on that, is from the shift of She Recovers to a nonprofit and to trying to give, more access to people, but also it's incredibly hard to run a big giant business like that. You need some kind of compensation. We're not independently wealthy. And so it's tough. And I just wanted to riff with you on that for a second, like what you're thinking about that.
Well, we were an LLC and we had applied for charitable status. And as an LLC, as a business, we were thriving. But everything we did was in person. So we did retreats, like 10 or 12 retreats a year. We did conferences every 18 months. We did workshops, like we went on a tour, like we did a Creating Connections tour. I did one in Seattle. We've actually been to Seattle twice to do events. And then we were like, oh, let's apply to, what I wanted to do was create a nonprofit so that we could provide people with access to our paid offerings that couldn't otherwise afford them. But
yes,
because we were that, bougie recovery outfit that goes to Bali and Mexico and all of these other things, right? And it was never intended to be like that. It's just the way things turned out. So we applied to become a nonprofit, and we got the nonprofit status on April 6th, 2020, like a couple of weeks after the pandemic, at the same time that we were canceling 10 or 12 retreats, canceling Miami, canceling our workshops, had no income, had a small team of like 6 or 8 people. And the pivot was like a godsend, because now we could say, okay, we need donations. We started 2 meetings a day on March 17th. And these are like outside of our identity-based meetings. We've done 2 meetings a day every single day since March 17th, 2020, except for one meeting when we were in Chicago. And there was just, things fell apart. But very quickly it became about, because everybody else was also jumping online and doing it, right? And everybody was, and no judgment, no nothing other than to say the membership model was what was being used. And I said, our meetings are free. Taryn and I said, our meetings are free. Because, and it's not even that not everybody, like even people who might have the $15, $18, $19 a month, like some people don't have credit cards, so they can't even register for those things. And I wanted them to be free.
Yeah, I love that. There's been quite a bit of momentum on women's recovery, and especially post-pandemic. And a lot of it, you're right, started as moms groups and paid memberships, and rightly so, because you have to get paid for your time and your work, and it costs money for these platforms and all of it. I completely understand, but I think we're really revolutionizing a woman's recovery and carving out these spaces in, no matter if it's a mom's group or She Recovers or a private coach doing, like I do Rewired Sober. It's giving women a space that's our own, where we can bring our whole self in. And I think you can't put a price on that.
No. People have different levels of resources. And and that's why I do, when people come and say, like, I need recovery, what do? I always say, well, hop onto our meetings, they're free, but get to some 12-step recovery meetings because they're free too and they're plentiful. And then kind of go from there. But I love, like, the patchwork, the idea of a patchwork of individual recovery. I love seeing, like, there's all the moms groups and the Swift, Sober, Swifty, like all the different things, right? And it's just kind of about everybody gets to find where they belong. Belonging is everything in terms of mental health, right? And you need to find where you belong.
Yeah. And when I started in recovery, I didn't even have a checking account. I was so broke. My car was broken down. Now, granted, I was a registered nurse, but I had hit such a bottom. I was unemployable. I had $0. Thank God I had a roof over my head, but just barely. That's about the level of my resources. All I could afford was to walk into a 12-step meeting and maybe put $1 in the basket. Yeah. And as time went on, became more resourced with more time in recovery. But I say the same thing to people. There are resources available no matter what level you're at. If you take public transportation and you have no checking account like I did, you can still walk into a 12-step meeting. And you can still find recovery. And then later on, when you get a checking account and a computer with a Zoom account, maybe you can join those online groups. Yeah. But I love that there are resources for people at every level. I certainly have utilized them. And I understand there's levels of privilege. I didn't have the money for a sober coach. I was missing 4 teeth. I didn't have a job. I mean, I get it.
I know, yeah. I often say, the difference between me and the mom down the street who lost her kids to the system because of her addiction was I had wonderful parents who were, like, in denial about how sick their daughter was. And so, like, they just took the kid. I could drop the kids off for an hour and come back 3 days later and they'd go, how was your weekend?
I love it. Yes. I mean, we have to acknowledge. I've said that from the very beginning, even when I didn't have words. Before the George Floyd movement and, Black Lives Matter, I didn't really have words to describe privilege. I knew as a white cisgendered woman with parents with financial means that coming into recovery, I already had a leg up over other marginalized communities.
Sure. Yeah. We talk a lot about capital, like recovery capital and how much recovery capital people have, right, when they get into recovery and then as they go along, for sure. I mean, for us, one of the important things for us in our community is that we have free online meetings. 12-step recovery is free, but whether they're going to stay there or not will depend on a number of things, including their relationship with trauma, right? So, I know women who, like, they went to an AA meeting and they were traumatized because they were asked to share. Yeah. And they weren't expecting that. And they were like, or because somebody came up at the end and told them, here's what you're going to do. You're going to do, and they were like, they just came out of, like, the most controlling, abusive. And so it's just about, I think when we talk about intersectionality and we talk about diversity, it's recognizing that. So one of our intentions, guiding principles, is we believe in early intervention. We don't have to hit rock bottom to pursue recovery in any area of our lives. And so I think that I'm really, especially as a health policy expert, like in every area of medicine and health, we're so focused on early intervention. And yet in the addiction world, it's like, okay, I'm sorry, we can't help you until, like, you're near death. And then we're going to find the resources, even if you don't have the resources to pay for that resource.
Which are usually just detox. They're usually not a long-term solution. That's where your insurance, if your insurance will cover it once you've fought all the red tape.
Yeah. And I mean, it's pretty sad. Even in Canada, where I live, of course, and we have I'm very proud of our healthcare system. There are few public treatment options. It's certainly long lineups for those. Yeah. The access is very difficult. And I'm on the same lines with my personal coaching. In order for me to
offer it free for some people as a scholarship, I have to make some money because I am pulled away from my day job, which is nursing, which pays the bills.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just the society we live in. I couldn't afford to run my platform just based off of my own, coming out of my own paycheck. I wouldn't be able to do it. I'd love to. If I were married to Pete Nordstrom, here in Seattle, I'd do it. But that's not the life we live. So we do the best we can. And I think it's wonderful to talk to another entrepreneur and a founder because behind the scenes, we are doing everything we can to bring recovery to the masses. And often, people will form an opinion based on payment or fees or your model or structure. And it's hard. It is really hard.
And I really think it's very tied to the idea of the recovery world being so dominated by 12-step recovery for the last 70 years.
Absolutely.
Right? Is that, again, it's this whole idea. And my sister, God bless her, she became a recovery coach and lost every single friend, like her sponsor and other close friends in her world in a 12-step recovery program because their thing was like, you got what you got for free and now you're charging and now you're charging for it. And it's just, and she was so heartbroken. I remember saying like, so what if like, and it's just about coaching, right? Like, so what if people go back to school to become therapists? Do they not get to charge because they're in recovery and they should give it away because they had a sponsor? Like, it just doesn't make sense. And I do think we're doing better and better. And again, coaching isn't for everybody, but what a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful modality it is at such a great price point for people who like.
Yeah. I've gotten so many odd comments, and I too lost all my friends in the 12-step community, which was really hard. But I had to stick with my knowing and follow my curiosity about addiction science and neuroplasticity and trust my soul knowing as a woman. And I can tell you as, a triple board certified nurse who is well versed in neuroscience and addiction and mental health, I offer my clients way more than my quote AA sponsor was able to. She was wonderful. She was able to take me through the 12 steps of the big book, but that's about it. And there was a lot of misinformation, a lot of pseudoscience that wasn't real. And once I started working in mental health, I think I was maybe 1 or 2 years sober. I was like, wait a minute. This is, we can't be saying this stuff to people. It's not brain science. And so, all the things. But I'm glad that there are pathways for everyone, right? Because we come to recovery at the intersection of so many different. I actually had my clients do an intersectional exercise where, like, imagine if you have an orange and you stuck a whole bunch of toothpicks in it. Like, I drew a model like that, and I said, in the center of that is you. And then coming out of every toothpick is your race, your religion, your family background, your socioeconomic status, your, neurodivergence, your, LGBTQ. Like, you bring all that in. And that is how we come at your recovery. It just is.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing, again, from people with, health backgrounds is the irony that there's no focus, like there's no resources focused. There are few resources are focused on early intervention. Yeah. And on the other side of that is, again, like, health philosophy says client-centered.
Yep.
But in addiction recovery for so many years, and it's getting better now, it really is. And the people in the programs that we work with that are treatment are very much about, recognizing the whole person. But client-centered, or there's one way to do this, and still the fact that the majority of treatment programs in North America now are 12-step based. And I don't have a problem with that. If the treatment center says, we're going to introduce you to an evidence-based 12-step facilitation model, because it's evidence-based, but it's just one way. And so we're just going to walk you through some ideas here. But when that person leaves treatment, they know that there's Smart Recovery and Life Ring and Women for Sobriety and She Recovers. But it's just like...
Well, it's ease of the medical system. It's diagnosis, it's reimbursement, medical coding. medical school for providers. They're really not taught a whole lot unless you are specializing in addiction or brain science as a provider. You're not going to learn that stuff. You're going to be sent to a few AA meetings because it's easy, it's free. It's like, here, we're going to check that box. I know as a registered nurse, my section of teaching on addiction was like 30 minutes. And then we moved on to mother, baby, and cardiac and other areas of the body, right? And so I understand why we default to 12-step. I do. But there's so much more out there if you're willing to stay curious and do your own homework. And I do think the tables are turning. Women are really standing up and saying, wait a minute. There has to be something else where, because most studies don't include women. Most clinical trials are done on men for medications, for treatment processes, right? And so we don't know a lot about women's addiction studies. And that's a whole nother topic.
Well, and it is all about, like, we are the evidence. And so it is imperative that we gather and then share the evidence, right? So like we do regular assessment studies with the people in our community, and we have wonderful outcomes. Is maybe we call them outcomes. It's like kind of scientifically and from a research perspective, it's more like these are impact figures. But 80% of the participants that attend our online gatherings report a greater sense of belonging. 70% report improved mental health. 75% report enhanced self-awareness and coping skills, and there's another one, I think it's 65% report reduced stigma, right? And stigma, if we could get better at reducing stigma, everything would go up, because it's stigma that keeps that woman from reaching out and asking for help in the first place.
Absolutely. That's a whole nother podcast episode.
It is.
And speaking of which, we probably should wrap it up here. So, well, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you if, they have no idea about She Recovers or they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, if you Google She Recovers, we're going to pop right up there. My Dawn Nickel, DAWNNICKEL. I have my own website as well. I'm on Instagram as Recovering Dawn, and Facebook and LinkedIn. And if anybody's looking for online gatherings or mostly weekend-based, it's different identity-based groups, they'll find information right on the website. It's one of the first buttons on the main page of the website.
I love that. Thank you so much. I will link all that in the show notes.
Yeah. And also, just a point, we're doing, She Recovers did start off as a retreat program, and She Recovers is doing a retreat in Marble Falls, Texas in March, and York, Maine in October, and possibly a new one to be announced soon in September. So check out our retreats on our website too. Give yourself the treat.
Exciting.
It's a gift.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dawn.
Thanks, Kate. I'm really, really happy to get to know you better. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for spending this time with me. I love you all so very much, and I mean it. You can find me on all the socials at Rewired Sober. The links to join my coaching program are always in the show notes, as well as an email if you want to get in touch with the pod. So until next time.